problem? It's like, it's Yahweh's problem. Let's ask Yahweh. Yahweh, please give these Nigerians a way to read the word. They have no alphabet. They can't read. They have no books. So a couple weeks later, at this Torah study I was going to, the guy was saying that traditional Jewish wedding ceremony has a certain pattern and formula. And I found this interesting because I'd heard about it years before. And I said, what was that? I think I remember hearing about that. And he says it's actually keyed to the festival pattern. Well, as Christians, we don't worry about the festivals. That's done away with. There's no big deal. But the Jews, they still regard some of the festivals somehow or other. The beginning of the year is supposed to be in the spring, but the beginning of the year is Rosh Hashanah in the fall. And what's going on with that? Well, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. They're just some party days. But if you know the festival pattern, you can see that it's mapped to the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony. Well, this ought to be pretty interesting. So as the guy's going through this pattern, went on for a week or two, and all of a sudden, it dawned on me, it's like, wait a minute. This is thematically the exact same pattern as the 7 days of creation. And I'd been going to the Torah study for 3 years, and we were, read through about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and I thought, and it's the same pattern as the Mishkan. And then I started thinking, and then the other guy started, his assistant, a couple weeks later, was talking about how perhaps the Garden of Eden was laid out in the same format as the tabernacle. And it's like, that's the same pattern too. And I thought, I wonder how many other places has this pattern? Maybe 12? So I thought, well, where else would you look? The Beatitudes, same pattern. The Lord's Prayer, same pattern. Some of the parables that Yeshua taught, same pattern. Some of the things that Paul talked about, same pattern. And then Avi Ben Mordecai came out with his book on Messiah 3, and I was looking at that, and he had a Sephirotic tree 10-stage pattern. And I was looking through there, and I could say, wait a minute, there's another way you could read all these things, and most of them could be read as this pattern of 7, which is the same Mishkan pattern thing, and it's like, wow, there's something about this. And I realized there's a message in the pattern. It's not just the words that are written in a pattern form. There's a message in the pattern, which I'll show you, which is on the chart down there in the color section with the 2 black bars and these other things. I'll show you what it is. And I realized either this is craziness or this is like really, really profound, because this is like his signature. Well, I later found that his signature is really the Aleph and Tav. As I said, so shall it be. That's the signature. He says in Deuteronomy 13, if there comes to be a dreamer who has a dream and the dream comes true, oh, it must be Yahweh because it came true. If there's a prophet who tells you something and it comes true, oh, it must be Yahweh because it comes true. If he leads you astray into something other than what I said, this is a trick. It's a test from Yahweh to see whether you will quickly stray from the way that he told us. And when we've proven that we're steadfast in what he said, we're supposed to put that guy to death. It's not just that it comes true, but it comes true and that it maintains the story of the scripture that Yahweh presented to Moshe for us to regard. That's the real test. But here's the Mishkan pattern. Day 1, he said, let there be light. And he separated the light from the darkness. But the tabernacle piece is the big white linen fence with the 4-color door, outside of which is the darkness in the wilderness. And if there was the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, boiling around over the tabernacle, you could picture like the tabernacle, this white linen fence like a lampshade glowing in the darkness of the wilderness. Separating light from dark is the first day. The big white fence is the Mishkan, and the first festival is Pesach. He said, Anoki, Yahweh El-Heka, I'm Yahweh Elohim. I'm the guy that took you out of Egypt. The word Egypt is Mitzrayim, where we get similar to the word misery, Mitzrayim, where you have Zadi Resh, which is like a rock in a hard place, narrow straits, and then just, I can't move here. And he says, I've come to give you the liberty of me being your overlord, me being your master, me being your Elohim. I've set you free, and I've shown you out of the door of their camp to the door of my camp. That's the first piece. Right inside the gate is the altar of sacrifice that had 4 corners and had this barbecue grate. If you read what the Levites did when you brought a sacrifice in, and they said it was right inside the gate. It's like, so we went there and we looked. In fact, the Seventh-day Adventists have this Mishkan that they bring around, and they set up a full-scale model. In fact, it's maybe about the size of this room or so. You come in the gate, well, maybe the altar is up here. They say right inside the gate. You step inside the gate and would be right here. And then right back there would be the kadosh place, the set apart place. And halfway between here and there is the laver. So what does that mean? So the priests are in here and they got to wash at the laver, and then they come and cut up the animals and they go back to the laver. There's this stuff going on out in the courtyard. And then inside the kadosh place, menorah, table of showbread, altar of incense, and then there's another veil, and there's the, we call it the Ark of the Covenant, but it's Ark of the Testimony, really is what it says, in the Kadosh Kodashim. As soon as you come in, there's this barbecue grill. If you read what the priests did, they took the sacrifice, and they brought it in, and they cut it up. They bled out its blood, took out its skin, its entrails, the dung, certain pieces of the animal. It's a matter of processing, right? These are types, models. Nobody could just barge right into this Mishkan. If you were in contact with the dead, you had to have the ashes of the red heifer cleanse you, decontaminate you is the word in Hebrew, outside. You're decontaminated from the dead outside. You come in, you deal with this altar of sacrifice, and then, now we're looking at model types. Halfway between here and the Kadosh place is the laver, and then inside the Kadosh place. So I'm just talking about I know the Seventh-day Adventists get into the tabernacle quite a bit and they have their own rendition. I'm not arguing with them, but I'm showing you something. Processing. What happened on the second festival? Separate leaven from unleavened. What happened on the second day? Separate water from water. It sure looks the same. Leaven and unleavened looks pretty much the same. Water from water looks pretty much the same. But you're supposed to separate things when you come in. The next day was the festival of Shavuot. It was a bronze laver made from the mirrors of the women. Did they just melt down the bronze, or did you actually see your reflection? A woman who gives birth, the offspring is kind of a mirror reflection of the women. There's this theme going on there. The third day, he separated water from earth, and he actually spoke plant life into the earth, planted a seed of life into the earth, like planting a seed of life into the woman who will give birth after a period of gestation. The third festival is Shavuot. Now, I have a different way of rendering the festivals than almost anybody else I've seen. Todd Bennett happens to agree, but everybody else sees the festivals differently. They see the third festival as being cut the sheaf and raise it up. And then there's 7 weeks of 7, and you count. And then you've got 50th day Pentecost, Greek for Penta, 50, cost, count. Count 50, otherwise known as Bikurim, waving the 2 loaves. But according to this pattern, it's the same festival of 50 days. One festival of 50 days. And it makes a difference because that's the split, the difference between the spring feast and the fall feast. So if this is a 50-day festival, the letter Nun happens to be the number 50. 1 through 10, the full package of Aleph is a plan, this is what I'm going to do, and Yod, this is my doing. 1 through 10 are from here over to there, and this lines up with 11 and 12, which is actually letters Kaf and Lamed, and this lines up with Mem and Nun, which is 13th and 14th letter, but Kaf is actually also regarded as 20, and Lamed is 30, Mem is 40, and then is 50. It's like a wheel within a wheel. There's all these different systems. I don't want to confuse you, but I'm just trying to show you this is more than just a simple thing. Those are the spring feasts. The fall feasts line up with the menorah, which lines up with the Samet. This lines up with Mem, Nun, Kaf, Lamed. This lines up with Het, Tet, and Yod. The table of showbread, which I draw like this, which is a table with 2 piles of, but it also kind of looks like a mask, right? Like the Moon Ranger. There's his hair and his nose and his mouth, and it's kind of. The reason I say that, a mask, is because the word is panim, which is bread, but the word pane is face. So the word, show is pane. It's lachem panim. Show? What do you show on your face? Expressions. The word pei nun is a form or a kind or an expression, but what does that got to do with bread or faces? On Judgment Day, Yom Kippur is what it lines up with. You could say our faces are revealed. Judgment Day, not necessarily the ultimate Judgment Day, but even at Yom Kippur, you got to show what's really going on. your motive, your intention, your word, your action, your deed, everything going on is exposed, and it's put into the scales of weighing for balance, weighed and measured, that the eye will look at. These are all themes. Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, the altar of incense. And then the Ark of the Covenant would be Shemini Atzeret. Now, does anybody know if Shemini Atzeret is a festival? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people don't regard Shemini Atzeret as the seventh festival because they say, well, the seventh festival is Sukkot. According to this pattern, if Shavuot is one 50-day festival, you've only got 6 festivals, and it means Shemini Atzeret is the seventh. If you look real close at the scripture, Sukkot is a 7-day festival. The word Shemini is 8. The word Atzeret is a gathering or a get-together. And so it actually means 8th get-together. But it's a 7th festival because the last day of Sukkot is not a mandatory get-together. The 8th day is outside the envelope of the 7 days of Sukkot, and it's its own day, which means it's a commanded gathering, which means it's a festival. But people disagree, and virtually every other teacher won't tell you this, but there's a pattern. I'm showing you the pattern. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just showing the pattern for what it's worth. Okay, day 1, light, made light. Separated water from water, separated water from land, and spoke plant life, the seed of life, into the earth. The next day, he put the sun, moon, and stars in the sky, day 4. Picture menorah. You've got houses of principality, like the constellations in their places. Day 5, like tipped scales on Judgment Day. Heaven and hell, you got to see a picture. The fish in the sea and the birds in the air. Day 6, like Sukkot, the day of tabernacling together, the mouth issues, the pay, singing and eating and talking. Sukkot, he made man and animals for life and community on the face of the earth. And then the 7th day, cut off, the Shabbat, the Zadi, the Ark of the Covenant. So the pattern here of these 3 things, why should I compare the 7 days with the 7 festivals with the Mishkan? Does anybody know the difference between Halal and Kadosh? You know what Kadosh means?
Holy,
Holy set